Hello, and welcome to the first edition of my podcast. My name is Ethan Kahana, and I am your host. I'm very excited to have community high school jazz teacher Jack Wagner join me today. A devoted educator, Jack has been teaching at Community since 2008, growing the program into one of the top high school jazz programs in the world, as well as founding the Guest Artist Series at Community, which brings jazz musicians from around the world to give masterclasses. Jack has led Community in winning the prestigious DownBeat magazine's Best High School Jazz Group Award for the past 5 years. He is also the author of a jazz instruction book, The Straight Ahead Toolshed, and has released multiple albums with Community, including one that I was fortunate enough to be part of in 2019. Jack played an instrumental role in my development, both as a musician and as a person. I can honestly say that Jack is a life-changing teacher. Welcome, Jack. How are you doing today? Thank you for joining the show.
No, good. Thanks, Ethan, for having me. It's exciting.
So obviously with classes being moved online, it's different. It's hard for all teachers, but for a music teacher, probably even more so. So how are things going with moving online this semester?
Yeah, it's been one of the biggest challenges of my professional career, especially as a teacher. There's no doubt about it. It's been really hard. Having said that, I honestly could say I've done as well as I think I could do. I really have put a lot into trying to make it as good as I can. It's not going to be quite as effective, right, as the real thing in person, but I'm trying to make the most of what we can do. It's a relatively inefficient format to teach or learn in, right? Any simple thing sometimes ends up taking 3, 4, 5 times longer than normal just to get through. You end up missing out on just those little moments in a classroom where a little look from a kid or a passing quick question or a quick observation can turn into a teachable moment. Some of that stuff I'm sure is just being lost in this format. So trying my best to replicate those kind of things as much as I can. I ask the kids to keep their cameras on if they can. You know, we don't make them do that in Ann Arbor, but we ask them to do it if they can because it's much more human if they do. And I've had to just change the way I deliver information and then try to assess what they're doing. So that's been the big challenge so far.
So are students still playing together anyway, or using an online platform?
Yeah, so we use Zoom to have our classes, and we have a learning management system in Ann Arbor called Schoology that we use, which is a way of taking care of assignment giving and data collection and grade housing and all of that kind of stuff. Delivering also any kind of written lessons like PowerPoint presentation type things or any kind of materials. They can all be given through that LMS. So that's really nice. But yeah, I keep the kids together in groups as if we were going to be together. The hope was that we'll form them that way this year so that if and when we are allowed to go back to in-person learning, everything is in the right place. The kids are used to being with the personnel they would be with when they come back so that we can hopefully hit the ground running. That's what I would really like to see happen.
So has there been more of a struggle with the lower groups or the upper level groups?
Yeah, the younger ones, it's been harder because they coming in and having not played much of this music before. Some of them had some jazz experience, perhaps in some of the middle school bands with jazz, but there's a number of schools that don't have that anymore. And so they're coming in trying to learn a new music language, a new genre without a lot of background. And we're trying to do that online. So it's a lot trickier. And so I've seen that the pacing with them has been slower than we would normally have if we were in person. But I knew that right off the bat that we would just not be able to cover as much territory as we did. So the trick is to just try to deliver it in a high quality way so that it sticks and makes a difference and teaches them as much as we can teach them. And then we'll try to make up for time later on. You know?
Yeah. One thing that you always did was you always taught that jazz is it's a language and it's a communicative thing. So one, how are you still having students feel excited and communicating with each other through jazz, and how are you tracking student growth?
Yeah, those are great questions. I'll do the last one first. With student growth, I have them submitting a lot of recordings to me, like video recordings of them playing, so that I can check on how they're doing. And that's a lot of my assessments are that way. I've had a couple of tests where they actually do them as a performance for the class. Everybody's watching. So I want to mix that in so the kids don't lose their ability to perform and to have that little
Yeah.
edge that you need to perform for each other, right? And so we've done that a few times, but a lot of them have also been get some recording into me by say this Friday or whatever, that when the assignment is due, and then they send it in, and on my own time afterwards I can go and assess how they're doing, give feedback, that kind of stuff. Um, they One thing is that in a lot of ways I've tried to flip the class where I've made some videos of lessons so that they could watch the video lessons on their own time in between and then come to the class with that stuff learned and observed already, and then I can then answer questions and kind of expound on those concepts, demonstrate with my instrument or the piano or whatever, and try to show them different things or show it in a recording from a professional, legend or whatever. Try to show them things like that. So we've done that a lot. And then one of the nice things is that we've been able to use this software called DownBeat Music. It's pretty new. They were really developing it heavily this past summer when COVID was really taking off. And so the idea with that is that students can play to a click track or a pre-recorded backing track. They can all play at roughly the same time, although they can't hear each other. But what that software does is it takes in what they played and then it puts it all together rhythmically. So then immediately, and really within a minute or two, you can hear back what the band sounds like.
Wow.
And so that's been pretty exciting because that's as close as we can get to playing, synchronously as you can online. That we've found that's feasible. There's a couple other pieces of software out there where you can play at the same time as people, but the demands are that you've got to have like really good bandwidth. You've got to be plugged in through Ethernet, things like that we really couldn't require because of inequities out there. But this one I'm talking about works for everybody that's got an internet connection, and the school district's done an incredible job of making sure that everybody does have an internet connection. So we've had a lot of success with that. Just getting kids to have those projects, which is really nice.
Yeah.
So yeah, I feel really, really pleased that we've had that.
That's really cool how the program has adjusted and with the times. So more generally, you have a lot of students in the program who go on to be professional musicians or plan on being professional musicians or music educators, go into that industry. So when do you kind of know when the trajectory of a student is pointing towards that direction, and what do you do to mentor them? Are you harder on them? So can you please explain some of that process?
Yeah. What I'm looking for, number one, from someone that might potentially be a music major is their desire. All the great jazz musicians you ever meet, and probably all the great musicians you ever meet in any genre, they all have this common passion for the music. They just can't seem to picture life being any other way, right? They don't think about it necessarily about how much money are they going to make, how much security is there going to be. They just can't seem to, well, it seems like a negative way to put it. They just love it, and they love living in the music and swimming in it constantly. So it's a lifestyle. It's an interest level that's really deep and profound. And so I try to see if I see that in certain kids, and certainly foster that if they want that. I always want to be a program where we could serve every kid's needs. So the kid who only wants to practice 20 minutes to a half hour a day, there's a place for them with us. But then there's also a place for kids who want to get to the highest levels and make it into the highest music institutions at the next level. I've always wanted to be able to serve all those kinds of needs because I don't want to be an elitist program, and I don't also want to water it down. And if I've got a student who really wants to go full bore with this, I want to be able to give them as much as I can give them before they go on. So I'll look out for that passion, that desire, that ability, that almost that inability to stop. Like they just can't stop playing. They just love playing. They love studying, thinking about music, analyzing, reading about it. Those are always good indicators that someone like that will be a good music major. Because the life is not easy, right? It's not easy to be a musician always. Certainly not in jazz. It's not one of the most popular forms in the world anymore. So it doesn't draw the financial gains that pop or rock do, or rap or R&B, um, hip hop, those kind of things. So you want to make sure that if someone's going to be a music major, they're not doing it just because they can't think of anything else to do,
Mm-hmm.
or um, for some kind of lesser reason. I mean, it's always a little scary when I see a kid who hasn't practiced for 3 or 4 years with us, and then all of a sudden, their fall of their senior year, they say they want to be a jazz
Yeah.
music major. I'm like, what? What are you talking about? It doesn't make any sense to me at all. Why do you think that you should go spend a lot of money to, unless they've had some kind of epiphany,
Yeah.
but that's the one, that's the red flag for me. But usually, the students get a good sense for what the music demands with our program, because we make it really demanding. It's a tough program to get through. But I like that because I want students to have the rigors of learning the music, but I also want them, if they want to be music majors, I want them to kind of know what they're in for. This music is not easy, right? If you think of Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 hours, I mean, you need that to get even just started in this music, right? Jerry Bergonzi was a teacher of mine. He used to say, hey, practice as much as you can with everybody you can, and listen to everything you can for 10 years, and you'll start to play this music.
Yeah.
Right? It just takes a lot of groundwork. And so if we can make the program rigorous enough, like we have been, I think a student kind of knows what they're in for before they get to college, about this is the kind of demand, the discipline this music requires. It's not for the faint of heart, but if they love it, they don't see it as work so much. They see it as pure joy to sit there and whittle away at everything they're working on to get so good at.
Yeah. How often I remember you told us stories to motivate us in classes of students who started out in the first level jazz one, and out of nowhere they just took a huge step. They got obsessed with the music. So how
Yeah,
often do
yeah.
you kind of see that? And you know who I'm talking about.
Yeah, I can think of certain people over the years that just stick out that way, where they came in and they were very rough, maybe behind the average player at age 13 or 14. Um, and so at first blush, you think, okay, this is a project here. There's a lot of work to be done with this student, but you don't know how they're going to take it at the time. And then just all of a sudden someone falls in love with it, and they just practice like crazy. And sometimes they just leap forward. I've seen some kids go from like jazz, like we have 4 or 5 levels in our program, and I've seen them go from jazz 1 and jump right into like jazz 4 for their sophomore year, because they just are so hungry and they ask for so much extra stuff. And you can tell that even if they missed a few things along the way with the classes in between, you could just tell they're the kind of kid that if you just throw them the bits of information they need as they go, they're gonna fold that into their system, and they'll be just fine. And so it's happened a few times. It's not super common, but maybe once or twice a year you see somebody do that, and it's really fun to see that happen. And it's
Yeah.
inspiring because then you can tell other kids, like, look, maybe you've been kind of spinning your wheels for a year or two, but look at what this student was able to do in such a short time, when they just got really serious and put a lot of time in. So it's always there waiting for you if you want it. It's really about if you want it.
Yeah. So one thing that I've always been really curious about, but never asked you, is there's an individual level to jazz and how much you practice at home. And then the combos are so small. What I found when I was in your program, how the combo kind of works together in a group really matters. So
Yeah.
how do you what's your process in building combos?
Well, we, with our first 2 levels, they're larger classes and they're a little bit more introductory. Like, right, we teach some of the basic things to the students, and the idea is with those first 2 classes that for the first 2 years of high school, we lay down all the foundational stuff that students will need to be strong enough to be 1/5 of a band or 1/4 of a band. That's a lot of responsibility, right? If you're in an 80-piece orchestra, and you're the 30th violin or whatever, you're part of a group and you're very important, but there can't be as much pressure on you as if you're the only bass player in a 5-piece band, or if you're the only trumpet player in a 4-piece band or something like that, right? So it takes us a little bit longer because we have to get the kids to the point where they have that skill set to be able to handle that. So that's what Jazz 1 and Jazz 2 are all about. And what I found is that in general, the kids coming out of Jazz 2, they have the skills to then go on and be in that position. And then once we get to Jazz 3, 4, those upper levels, we've usually got 5 or 6 combos at that point, and we can have we can have 5 or 6 bands that are only 4 to 6 to 8 members large. So the students have to show that they can handle the musical material, but they also have to, show they can handle the maturity of being in that situation, because by then we want the kids to be performing quite a bit. And so the upper levels of our classes, those top 5 or 6 combos, are out doing gigs regularly in the area. And if we're going to put them in these situations where, some organization has donated to the program so that they can have a band make their party or their event more special, we've got to know that the kids are going to be able to handle the work and be able to be as professional as possible in those situations. So that's the goal for everybody that's coming through, is to get them to that level before they graduate so they can have this really unique experience. Because, I mean, how many people in the world really get to be in a jazz combo ever in their life?
Yeah,
Right?
it's
So if you
amazing.
can do it as a 16-year-old, it's pretty cool. So that's where we go at. I'm able to, I always tell the kids I'm auditioning you every day as I watch what they're doing. I generally don't like to do the thing where, you come and you play for me for 30 seconds and then I decide your fate for a year.
Yeah.
There's merit in there. There's something to be said for that, because that's real life in a lot of ways. There are a lot of jobs that are like that out there, where that's all you get to get the job. But I also see the flip side with especially with jazz, where people hire people they like, people that they get along with. If they're going to go on the road and they're going to hang out in a tour bus, or they're going to be in hotels and hotels across the country, they've got to get along with people. They got to know that their band members are going to show up, that they're going to be responsible, they're going to take care of learning the music. And so I treat it more like that, where I watch what kids are doing all year long, and then I decide, okay, this student needs to be in this band with these people because they're of a similar level of proficiency and artistry, and also maturity, and able to handle the ability to handle what's coming.
So, what do you do kind of when a band, you kind of sense tension in a band, or a band doesn't get along, and that affects their music playing?
Yeah, I should say that I think we try to lay the groundwork early on that, there might be some friendly competition going on, but for the most part, I try to take that out of the equation. The competitive part is part of being human. We all have it to some degree, but you could certainly take it too far for your own personal health, right? It could be detrimental to your own health if you get too competitive, in my opinion. And it could also be detrimental to other people if you take it too far, because things get out of hand and it gets too political and too tough. So that's not what I want for us and for our kids. So I do my best to have an atmosphere where kids are helpful and supportive of each other right from the get-go, and that we all celebrate the strengths and the varieties that everybody's coming in the door with, right? Jazz is such an amazing thing because what it does is it celebrates the individual at the same time as it celebrates the group. So, the way I think of it is that, everybody's got different things to offer, and we need to celebrate that and let kids be themselves and develop growing as their own self. So, if you think about it, like in terms of football, right? If somebody weighs 320 pounds and they're 6'6", nobody should give that person a hard time for not being an amazing sprinter as a wide receiver, because nobody would put that person in the position of being a wide receiver. Mm-hmm. They'd say, you should be a lineman. That's your strength. That's where you can help this team. That's where you can become yourself, right? And then you take the 210-pound, 6'2" person who's really strong and fast, and you say, you're going to be the receiver, right? And you can't say who's better than the other, right? I mean, they're both important. And if they switch jobs, things wouldn't go well. So jazz is kind of like that. You've got to recognize that we're all going to come in and play differently. We're all going to have skills that other people could be envious of. we're all going to have skills that we would love to raise up to the levels of other players, and we can be inspired by that. So if you look at it in that light, I think you do pretty well. And so our kids tend to get along pretty well. But yeah, after teaching 13 years in this program and 8 years in another one beforehand, sure, I've had my moments where kids were being knuckleheads and you have to sit them down. And
Yeah.
but it's not been too big a problem. But yeah, sometimes you just have to have these kind of heart-to-hearts with students. You get them together in small group. You say, look, we got to talk this out, because if
Yeah.
we're going to stay together, we're basically together for 4 hours a week when it's non-COVID times,
Yeah.
right? And so it becomes a little family, and people have to learn how to deal with family, right? It's just like life. So you don't always get to choose your family. You don't always get to choose who's in your band, right? And so
Yeah.
it's it's important for kids to learn those skills about how to play things smart, be supportive of each other, be decent. Don't let things get competitive and out of control. Don't make fun of somebody or belittle them. All that kind of stuff is really important. And so I think we've done a really good job of that, because the kids tend to get along really well, and it's really amazing to watch them become a family as the year goes on. I see the reticence in the beginning when they come together and they're a little shy to play for each other. They hope they're not going to be judged. They're teenagers, so they want to be liked just like any other human. But I see them start to loosen up with time, and as they get to know each other and they know each other's strengths and weaknesses, and it becomes really accepting. And so that's pretty special.
Yeah, I can. Some of my best memories in school were with members of my combo, and it really was a family. I can definitely attest to that.
That's
And
great.
I always, I always felt that you were motivating us and you were challenging us, and I always felt challenged in your program, which is great. When you were at William Patterson University or Ithaca College studying music, was there a specific teacher? I know you studied with people like Jerry Bergonzi, who really instilled that passion in you and challenged you.
Yeah. I mean, Jerry was amazing. I did private lessons with Jerry when I was going to Boston College. I thought I was going to be a science major,
Okay.
and it was kind of fun. I went to Emilio Lyon's repair shop at Rayburn's Music in Boston as a freshman. I was brand new in the city, and I was looking to buy a new mouthpiece, and I was playing. And then I said to Emilio Lyons, this legendary repair person. I mean, he was like Stan Getz repair guy and
Yeah.
everything, right? Um, I said, hey, I want to study with the best teacher in Boston. So I just want to get, I don't know who that is, but I want to know who that is, and I want to find that person and work with them. I said, I would really love to do that while I'm doing my studies. He said, oh, you want Jerry Bergonzi. He's the best. Jerry Bergonzi's incredible. He said, Michael Brecker wants to study with Jerry Bergonzi. I said, get out of here. He said, no, I'm not kidding. He said, Jerry is incredible. I said, okay. So he was so nice. He called Jerry, and he said, hey, I got this kid here who wants to work with you. I know you got a waiting list. He said, but this kid he's really passionate. He likes playing, and he sounds great. And I think you should take him. And Jerry's like, okay. So I started taking lessons with him right away, and it was just fantastic. I didn't know much about jazz theory at the time. I had done some improvising in high school, had some cool programs in high school, and then even in elementary school, I had a cool little program. But there was a lot about playing chord changes and about improvising with that level of depth that I didn't know about yet, and I hadn't gotten into it yet. So when I went to Jerry, it was almost like going to Einstein and asking him to teach you Newtonian physics. I mean, that's what it was like, because I needed a lot of basic theory work to be done. And Jerry was cool. He didn't care that I was so new and fresh at it. He was like, all right, let's do this. And he just started digging in with me with the basics and the foundational stuff that I needed to go to that next level. And the funny thing is that I was more into almost like a smooth jazz or kind of a funkier fusion kind of side of things. But I knew that if I studied with more of a straight ahead jazz musician, somebody who was coming more out of the tradition, I knew that those folks knew so much that if I learned that it would help me do the music that I was interested in at the time. I would do a better job if I learned it. Well, it turned out that after being around him, and after he started telling me people to listen to and started showing me aspects of the music that he specialized in, I fell in love with it. I found that to be even more of an interest for me than the other stuff I originally went there for to begin with. So that's kind of how it happened. And then I decided to be a jazz major. So I transferred to William Patterson because they had a really strong jazz program. And yeah, there were great folks along the way. I studied with some really great sax players like Gary Somalian, who's a killer
Oh.
Barry saxophonist. Steve Wilson was a teacher of mine for a while. Dave Dempsey, they were all great saxophone teachers. And then there was a number of other like combo teachers that would help me in the jazz combos. Like Rufus Reed was the program director. I got to work with Kenny Burrell for a year because he was when Rufus went on sabbatic. Kenny Burrell was a teacher. Steve Touré, Harold Mayburn. I mean, there was just John Riley, just incredible people walking the halls and helping us. You know, kind of like the way I'm helping you guys in the combos at my school now. Those were my teachers there in New York. These amazing musicians. So it was really fun, really inspiring, and they were the real deal. They weren't pulling any punches. They were demanding. It was a cool program.
So living in New York, in kind of the jazz hub of the world, was there ever a moment, because you hear all these stories of people like John Coltrane and Charlie Parker, they go to one performance that changes their life. Was there kind of one concert that you went to saying, oh, I want to do this?
Well, there were so many moments, like just going to clubs and hearing things. I remember I went to a masterclass with Sonny Rollins once. It was really sweet. That was at the Manhattan School of Music. I went and watched, and I got to ask him a question, actually. That was really fun.
What did you ask him? Do you remember?
I remember what I asked him. I asked him what it was like playing and being friends with Clifford Brown. You know, Clifford Brown, you know, was such an incredible trumpet player, and he died young. He was only 26, I believe, when he died in 1956. And Sonny Rollins was in his band right up until about the time he died. And Clifford was such a genius and such an incredible talent at such a young age that I think anybody that studies his music, we all just fall in love with him, right? So I wanted to know what Sonny, who was an equal legend to Clifford, what he thought about his friendship and playing with Clifford. And he said, you know, being around Clifford Brown, he said he was such a good person. He was such a decent, kind-hearted, almost angelic type person that I never really believed that he belonged on this earth. He was too good for this place. He said, and so when he died, I wasn't surprised. He said, it just didn't seem like he belonged here. He was too good for this. And that was really intense. You know,
Wow.
he didn't say much more than that. He didn't talk about the musical part of it. That was as deep as he got about it, but that was deep, you know, and, but he just felt like Clifford was spiritually way ahead of everybody else. I mean, he was only 26, but he seemed like he had so much wisdom about how to live a life the right way. And that really stuck with Sonny, you know, as much, if not more, than the music that Clifford was making with him. So that was really fun.
So,
yeah.
You mentioned talking about Clifford Brown and Sonny Rollins, but when you said that when you were playing saxophone, let's say in high school, and when you were studying with before you studied with Berganza, you were into more of the smooth fusion. So when did you start diving into jazz history and kind of identifying yourself in that kind of bubble or culture?
Yeah, you know, it's funny because there were little moments that were hinting at it when I was younger. Like there was a really cool little elementary school band that I was in with this guy named Sam Macaluso. He ran this elementary school jazz band. And so I got to improvise a little bit in there, and that was really fun. And an uncle of mine gave me a Dexter Gordon tape and Sonny Rollins tape. And I got to listen to those guys as an 11-year-old. I heard them, you know, and I remember thinking this is pretty cool. But then I kind of got more into the fusion and funk stuff, and I kept going, you know, through middle school and into high school. My high school band director was a good jazz musician. His name was Vinny Casada, and he could really play change. He was a great trumpet player. He could really blow, and he would say, "Oh, check out Johnny Hawes's or check out Charlie Parker," and you know, so I might learn like something out of an omnibook here or there. I remember we played anthropology, so I had some hints at this kind of music, but I was also doing a lot of the stuff that was more in funk and fusion. So then it was really with Bergonzi that I got really deep into it, and I started getting more curious about the people that inspired Bergonzi, because Bergonzi was such a strong player and such a great teacher. I was like, this is a whole world that I haven't really checked out enough. enough of, the traditional kind of straight ahead side of jazz. So then he started telling me what records to get. So he said, go get Cannonball Adderley's At the Lighthouse record. I said, okay. And I went and got that. And I used to listen to that. I'd be on long rides and I just had my Walkman in, and Sony Walkman. I don't know if you guys know about it in your generation, but I would listen to that stuff over and over again. So I started checking out people like Cannonball Adderley, Charlie Parker, John Coltrane, Freddie Hubbard, Bud Powell, Thelonious Monk, Chick Corea. I just started getting into that whole strain of the music, and then it just kind of blossomed from there. Once I got to William Patterson, I studied even more with those history classes. It was really fun. I had a good friend named Stephen Riley, who's a great tenor player. He's on the scene right now, and he's absolutely smoking. And we knew how great he was when I first met him. He was only 17 or something like that when he was going to school there, and he sounded so good. So I used to have really long talks with him and hang out, and we'd listen to records together with friends, and we'd jam. We go to, like, you were asking about gigs. I remember going into New York and seeing people like Joe Lovano at the Village Vanguard. I saw Wynton Marsalis at the Vanguard. I went to see Joe Henderson at Bradley's, sitting front row right next to Joe Henderson playing his sax, Josh Redman, you name it, just a bunch of incredible musicians. So yeah, I remember, jam sessions with like Eric Alexander and things like that. So it was just really intense. New York is an incredible place because I always say that like a week in New York, the lineups of a week in New York is like a year's calendar in any other city in the world. I mean, it's just an amazing place. So it was fun. It was really intense, and it was very inspiring. Scary too, though.
Yeah. What was your favorite jam session experience?
Oh, yeah, maybe that one with Eric Alexander. That was pretty cool. Yeah, it was this little dive bar in Paterson, New Jersey, kind of halfway between our college and Manhattan. And yeah, I just remember it being really hip because he was playing there, and I think Joe Farnsworth was playing as well. He was another great drummer. My friend Stephen Riley was there, a bunch of kids I knew from the school, and we were all just jamming, and it felt good. It was cool.
What did you play?
I'm sorry, what were you asking me?
What did you play with the group?
Oh, can't even remember, man. Probably just some, bop and hard bop kind of stuff, things like that. Yeah, I don't even remember.
So
yeah,
I read that you also had a performance with Michael Brecker. What was that like?
Yeah, that was incredible. We were in college, and he's the guest. He was friends with Dave Dempsey, and he came in, and it was amazing because at that point, I knew Brecker more as a Brecker Brothers player, so a lot of his funk and fusion records,
Mm-hmm.
and a couple of his solo albums and everything. And I wasn't aware of his history and knowing the whole span of the music, going back to bebop and hard bop and Lester Young and any of those kind of influences he would have had. I just wasn't as aware of that stuff with him as I could have or should have been, perhaps. But I was young. I don't even study the music for a year or two or three or whatever in a serious way. And next thing you know, I'm playing Barry Saxon's big band where he's the guest. It was amazing. It's a sound that we all know so well for saxophonists. I mean, he is one of the gods of the tenor saxophone world. And so to be in the same room with him and to hear him warming up and just to hear that coming acoustically out of an instrument near your face, it'll blow your mind. And then the experience of playing with him is really special too, right? So I had to pinch myself a lot. I remember that. But it was fun. I remember there was this really cool moment where like we were playing an arrangement of Body and Soul, and he said to the band, he's like, I don't know if I know that one. And I remember like there was murmurs amongst the kids, like, how does he not know this song? This is like one of the standard tunes everybody knows. And of course, it's just a silly moment, right? Kids would think something like that, right? Someone who's 20 years old, be like, oh, he doesn't know that song, right?
Yeah.
But it was such foolishness because I think what he meant was, I'm not sure if I know every little corner of this piece. Let me just hear what you guys are doing, and I'll figure it out. Yeah. And man, like he played the living mess out of it. If that's not knowing what a song is, I'd hate to hear what it would be like if
he does know.
I mean, it was ridiculously good, and it just went to show that because he was doing other projects in his life and he wasn't playing little gigs where he was playing standards, but he was making his own music and writing his own tunes and playing with like the most advanced players in the world, right? And this is about the time when he was doing his Return to Brecker Brothers stuff. So he's playing with, Mike Stern and Randy and, and Dennis Chambers, all these incredible musicians. So he's got these projects going on. So he's not necessarily sitting down anymore and studying these standards, right? So that's probably why it was rusty or not in his head. But he was such a phenomenal musician that him not knowing a piece was better than everybody else if they ever could know it. And he played the hell out of it. And I remember there was this one thing where we had to play this chord at the end of the piece, and he didn't want to look at the music for this. He just was like, let me just hear it. So we played this big, thick, dense chord with all these extensions and these convoluted, whatever, 13, sharp 11, all this stuff on top of this chord. And he hears the band and he just runs the arpeggio and hits everybody's part as he runs up. I mean, that's what it was like. I mean, he just was like, boom, and it was just instant. It was, and that was profound to watch at that time, or any time really. It was, you could just see how, for him, identifying a sound that complex was as easy as me looking at a piece of paper and saying that's blue. I mean, it was like that. I mean, it was just so cool. And it was just neat to be around someone who was that good. I mean, it was just exciting, and to hear him play the stuff we've been practicing before he got there. What a thrill.
Did he talk to you guys too?
Yeah. He's very humble. He's very humble. If you would say anything to him complimentary, he would always kind of deflect it and be almost self-deprecating, like, oh, no. You'd say things like, no, you don't want to talk to me about that. You want to talk to Jerry Bergonzi about that. Or, I'm not the best tenor player in the world. No. Don't say that, please. That's George Garzone. He was always pushing off the compliments to some other contemporary, which, we found amusing because he was the man. But I also, as I grew up, I understood what he meant. He was understanding what I was saying earlier in this, is that Brecker had his thing, but other people have their thing, and it's all valuable and it's all something to marvel in, right? So, Wayne Shorter always said, I'm just a drop in the ocean. That's all I am, Yeah. And Wayne Shorter was a genius, but he
Genius composer, genius player.
Yeah, genius at everything, right? And yet he realized that the realm of possibilities was so much bigger than his little life could ever have.
Yeah.
And so there's wisdom in understanding all that stuff.
Yeah, and from what I've heard, people like Wayne Shorter are such curious people. They just want to know everything. They want to learn everything, medicine and science and
I've heard that about
and
Wayne. Yep. I've heard some really cool stories about him and how his brain works, and he thinks of things in a really abstract, funny way. Like, he sees things at different angles that other people don't see, and it kind of gives you a little glimpse into his genius,
Yeah.
So those people are just special. They're just cool to be around.
So, digressing a little bit, what made you come to Ann Arbor, and how did you get your start in teaching? And I saw that one of your combos won a DownBeat award in 2006 before you were at Community. So
yeah, that was fun.
Yeah.
So my wife, who we weren't married at the time, we were just dating, Jamie, she came to University of Michigan to get a master's degree. And I guess, I was living in upstate New York. I just got done with Ithaca College for a master's in education and everything. And I was teaching at an elementary school, and it was a fun gig. It was really cool. But we were having a hard time driving 8 hours to see each other and all that kind of stuff. And so I said, let me just move out there to Ann Arbor. Ann Arbor seemed like a great town to work in. What I really wanted to do at that point, after teaching a couple of years in public schools, I realized that what I wanted to do was develop a jazz curriculum for young people. I was very driven at the time by this drama in my own head of, man, if only I would have taken this music more seriously as a younger person, like, what could I have done with it and all that kind of stuff. So I wanted to come up with a pedagogy, some approaches that could help young people learn it if they wanted to. And so that was kind of the driver for me, was like, I think Ann Arbor's a great town where I can probably get private students and pursue some things to put something like that together. But I knew I just needed some time to work it out. So I moved to Ann Arbor. I think that was in 2001. It was the summer of 2001. And right away, I got hired to teach combos as one of the many combo teachers at the Ann Arbor School for Performing Arts at the time. And so I was the young one, I was the rookie. So they gave me the young kids, which was
Mhm.
kind of cool because I had just come from teaching elementary kids. And so they gave me a band of, I think they were fifth and sixth graders. These are kids that were interested in doing jazz. It was advertised to them as you can come here and take jazz combo lessons. And I was hired to do that group. And it was cool because it was kind of like this little lab situation for me to work out some of the stuff I had already started working out, in college and in my first couple of years. And so I was like, well, now I can do this in a jazz combo situation. And so that was my laboratory. I was showing them repertoire. I was figuring out what repertoire was appropriate for young kids, like what were the easiest pieces to use for improvising. If you know about music, you know that kids of that age group, there's only so many scales, only so much range that they have on their instruments. So you got to find pieces that kind of work within that, or just push them beyond that a little bit without, inundating them. So it was great, and I got a nice private studio going too. I had a lot of private kids. It was really fun to do that, and I stayed at that program for until 2008. So yeah, about 7 years or so, and eventually, just through changes, I ended up becoming the director of that whole program. And so we had like 6 to 8 combos running at a time, and there were a couple combo teachers. Mostly by the end, it was me and Paul Finkbeiner that were running that, and it just kept getting more and more serious, and it was a lot of fun. Um, and so we had some great students in there of all ages. We had fourth and fifth graders taking jazz, and we had high school kids, and then we ended up having an adult jazz band for people that weren't like professionals, but just wanted to play on the side. So I remember we had like lawyers and administrators, all these folks like in a band playing. It was really cool, right? And so we just had this whole range, and this was all after school. It was an after school nonprofit organization. Um, and yeah, we won a DownBeat, and I guess '05 or '06 or whatever, I can't remember what year. That was a great band, a lot of great students in there, and we were very excited because we were just this humble little after school program, and we had won in a division that was for performing arts high schools. So we had actually were able to topple like some programs where like kids were going to performing arts high schools every day and studying, and we were so proud that we were able to win that contest with just like a once a week kind of meeting,
Wow.
for an hour and a half. It was really cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was fun.
So you said you were working on your pedagogy, and it must have been affirming to know that, okay, what I'm doing is working. It must have given, and
Yeah, those
so
moments they help you think maybe I'm on the right track.
yeah,
It's nice to have something like that.
so when you got to community in '08, what was your vision for the program, and what were some challenges you faced, and how do, because now you don't have a group that's meeting once a week, you have a everyday kind of thing. So what was kind of your vision for that?
Well, I was excited to dig in because I knew after that 6 or 7 years at the performing arts school, right, that the stuff that we had been building and using was working. It seemed like we were going in the right direction, and I just kept adding to it, and it was really fun. But I kept thinking, man, if I had them for more than an hour, hour and a half a week, if I had them for 4 hours a week or whatever, what could we do? It could be so great, right? Um, so I was very excited about the prospects of what we could get accomplished with that kind of time together. The challenge is, there was a lot. There's a reason why you're really hard pressed to find a public school that will allow jazz combos to be studied at all, or certainly not as the sole focus like community high. That was what made things so unusual there, and that was a great product of Mike Grace, who was before me, and Bart Pollett, who was before him. This went back to like the mid early '70s, and Bart Pollett was kind of getting this program launched with combo based music, and then Mike Grace got to another level, and he kept going in that same direction with combos, and so I was there to try to keep it going. um, it's not super financially, well, it's not as efficient financially to have such small classes, right? So there's a lot of schools that really just can't see themselves doing that, or they don't maybe have a teacher that specializes in that kind of music. So it doesn't work out. And the traditions have always been classical and marching and all that stuff, so a lot of schools don't really do this. So the tradition, the challenges were that there wasn't a lot there wasn't a lot of tradition out there to borrow from, right? It was kind of like, I wanted to kind of blaze my own trail here about how I wanted to teach this. And it was a challenge, but it was exciting. I like those kind of challenges. I
Is
was
that when you
excited about
made the Straight Ahead Toolshed?
Oh, the book, it's funny. The origins of the book, I had dozens and dozens of different kind of educational handouts that I had made, like little studies of different things, chords, scales, rhythm things, whatever. Um, and I was giving them out to students. I would make photocopies, I'd give them to kids, but kids being kids, I'd have a class of 20 kids, I'd give out 20 copies, and then they'd walk out of the room and there'd be 7 of them on the floor. And it just made me crazy. I was like, I don't know how to do this. If the kids don't take the stuff they need with them, how are they supposed to practice for the next 2 nights
Yeah.
when they leave it here? And so I was constantly making photocopies again, handing things back out again, waiting for kids to go find stuff they lost, rummaging through their bags. I was like, this is ridiculous. I just need to turn this into a book so that they have to lose the whole book in order to lose stuff. And so I took a couple of summers in a row. It was about my second or third year at school. I was like, I just got to have a book. And so I just made the book out of the foundational stuff I had. And man, am I glad I did that, because it's just made it so much better for the program. I mean, it's just way more organized. We just, if you only got so much time, you don't want to spend X amount of percentage of it while kids are trying to find something they lost, or you yourself having to go find another copy for them. So it wasn't like this bolt of like inspiration. It was just me. I got to put my stuff together into a book and make this work for us. And it turned out to be, a really useful tool, I think.
So you talked about the gigs earlier, and what the gig did for me as a student was it gave me kind of a sense of responsibility. And I would go to a gig and say, okay, I'm not just representing myself, but I'm representing you, and I'm representing the program, and I'm representing my combo. And that was really important for me. And that was one of the greatest experiences I had because it's so unique.
Yeah.
So was it hard to put trust in students? And I know you've probably had a lot of crazy experiences with gigs. So can you tell a story of just some crazy experience with a gig?
Yeah. At first, when I came in, I was like, how does this work? How are we going to get these kids to do gigs? They're kids, they're high school kids, and I didn't know if I could trust kids to show up, do the right thing, behave properly. I just didn't know. I wasn't sure how that was all going to work, and then of course, will they play well enough? And all that was another concern. And act professional, be professional. That was just something that I was curious about and wanted to see happen. And so, I guess I just got better as time went on about how to like prepare kids to do it. It's like, okay, this didn't work, or that worked okay, or this could be better. We just kept tweaking things. But yeah, we had to, it had to turn into something where the gigs became kind of sacred to the kids. They had to realize how special it was for them to have a chance to go and perform in the community for others and be treated like a professional, right? It kind of goes hand in hand. It's like if you go and you show up and you're on time and you look good and you dressed right and you've got your business taken care of and you sound good and you're polite to the host and to the guests, and you clean up after yourself and you look, like you don't have a disheveled bandstand. If you take care of all that kind of stuff, we'll be all right, because people will be pleasantly surprised to hear how well these high school kids play and all that stuff. So that was the kind of stuff that we wanted to keep developing. And but yeah, there was crazy moments, but I think by making them sacred like that, kids wanted to be a part of it. They wanted to go do that. I think they just naturally get excited about performing, playing for people, being held in such a high esteem, because what ends up happening is they play really well. People hear the music. If they're not looking, they sound professional. And so they hear it and they assume it's professionals. And so they assume they're going to turn around and look over and see a bunch of adults. And then when they see 15, 16, 17-year-olds, it is kind of shocking to a lot of guests that don't expect that. And so the kids would get a kick out of the responses from that. People were like, I can't believe you're in high school. Or, this is so wonderful. When I was in high school, I was doing all this knucklehead goofy stuff, but you guys are amazing. So it just starts to, snowball for kids. and they want these gigs. And then I just basically, I was just kind of tough about it. I was like, look, you can't mess this up. You can't skip a gig. You can't not show up. You can't forget. You can't be late. You got to get there. We always have our kids get there 45 minutes to an hour early to set up. I mean, that stuff, I was just really strict about that. It's like, if you want to do these, you're going to do it this way, or otherwise you can't do it. It's that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And, but yeah, there were some stories. I mean, I think I can count on my two hands the number of times a kid didn't make a gig in my 13 years. Unexpectedly. Sometimes kids would get sick or would need a substitute or something like that's fine. But just showing up and a kid not being there, like, just hardly ever happened. But yeah, there was funny stories. There was one time when I remember you did some gigs for the law school at U of M, and those were fun because they would have multiple rooms around the campus where they had various classes of the law schools, getting together for a party or whatever. And Mike Gracely, he was doing this stuff before I was there with these guys, and so we had multiple bands in different buildings, and I was running from building to building and from room to room, checking on all bands. Like, I had 5 or 6 bands playing at the same time, which is stressful, right? So I would check on the bands and see if they were cool. And I got to this one band, and the one kid wasn't there. And I said, "Where is he?" And they said, "Well, he's working." I said, "He's working?" They said, "Yeah." I said, "Where's he working?" They said, "Oh, BTB Burrito." BTB Burrito. I said, "Well, that's not that far from here." I was like, that's down at the corner of Packard and State. And at the time I was up at the law school, which is just, maybe a quarter mile up the hill or whatever, eighth of a mile up the hill, and I said, okay. So I ended up going down, like, wearing my suit, and I think the football game had just gotten out or something like that. There was a million people in the streets. It was crazy. And so I get to BTB Burrito. No, I remember what happened. I thought he was at the BTB Burrito at the cross town. There was 2 of them. And so I went to the other one because I didn't know about this one. I only knew about the one over by Good Time Charlie's, right?
Yeah.
So I get in my car. It is such a pain, right? There's no spaces or anything. I drive over there, and I go inside, and I said, "Is such and such person here?" They said, "No, he works at the other one." I said, "There's another one?" I said, "Yeah, on State Street." I said, "Oh." And I realized it was close to where I was. So I parked back close to where I was. I walked down the hill, and I saw him in there. He was working at the cash register. When he looked up at me, he was like, "Oh God." And, he had to wait for me to work my way through the line. I came up to the cash register. I said, "Man, you can't do this." And I gave him an earful. And I remember this young lady that was working with him, just looking up at him and me and like, "Who is this guy? And why is he giving me all this trouble?" It was so funny, but stuff to laugh about now, but we didn't want that stuff to happen, but he did fine. The kid was great. He was a great musician. He never let it happen again, and he learned, and that's what you care about. And but it's a fun story. Stuff like that.
That's really funny, and that's one of the best parts about your program, the sense of responsibility it gives you, and
Yeah, I like that.
And it really makes you serious about what you're doing, and gives you a sense of purpose in that.
Yeah. I'm glad you say that. I mean, it is a special thing, and it's not, terribly common, I guess. I'm used to it now, but it's probably not super common, so I shouldn't take it for granted. It's very cool.
Yeah, and other things like I never took for granted are, I mean, that CD we made, going to the competitions. It was just a plethora of really, really cool experiences that I'll always look back on. So I have to thank you for that.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah. You're welcome. I'm glad you were part of it, man. Thanks for being part of it. So great.
my last question for you is something that happened at my graduation. A student
Okay.
of yours, he gave a speech saying the reason he came to community was because of you.
Oh.
And
Okay.
so when somebody says something like that, as someone who's been, you said that, look, you wanted to make, you had a pedagogy and you had a vision of what you wanted to do. And when you hear kids say, "Oh, I went to community because of Jack," or "Jack was my favorite part of high school," how does that make you feel?
Oh yeah, that's sweet when that happens. I mean, that's amazing. Yeah, you want to do good things. You want to help kids. You want to try to offer them what you have to offer them, and you hope it gets through. And so when you hear those kind of things, if it helps somebody, it makes you feel great. I mean, it's a really pleasing feeling. Yeah, I try not to get too dramatic about that stuff. But who doesn't like to hear something like that, right? It's like you want to know that you're connecting and making a difference, and if you can do that for a few people in your life, that's a great thing. So yeah,
Yeah.
I love it.
Well, yeah, I can definitely say the same as him.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you.
Yeah, I really appreciate all that you've done for me and for everyone, for the people in the program. And thank you so much for joining my first podcast.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, I had a good time here. This is fun. So I feel honored to be in front of you first. And sorry, I was rolling my eyes earlier. My kids were walking in. I was like, "Guys, I'm in a podcast right now." Like,
No, I love it. I love it. I've met your kids, and your kids are great.
Yeah, they're fun.
Well, thank you so much, Jack.
Thank you. All right. Well, stay in touch and let me know how things are going.
Yeah.
All right.